Our guest today is Omar Abdullah. He's been in active politics, I realized yesterday, for now 20 years. The first time he became MP was in 1998. Three-term Lok Sabha MP from Srinagar, Union Minister of State for Commerce, Union Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, full-term Chief Minister, one of the few lucky ones to actually serve full-term other than after his father. Very few people do. And as you know, situation in Kashmir is not really very good. It's under governor's rule. The local body elections have seen very little voting percentage. And in today's ID exchange, we'll try and ask him more about how he plays that role and balances those conflicting requirements. You know, we all know that things are really bad in Kashmir, but how bad is bad?
I mean, I'm not one of those who believes that it's as bad as the early 90s, because I think in terms of levels of militancy, in terms of the killing of political workers and civilians, we're a long way away from the dark days of 2002. But in terms of sentiment, in terms of alienation, we've gone a long way backwards from Parliament elections 2014, Assembly elections 2014. The levels of local recruitment into militancy are a matter of huge concern. The spread of militancy into areas that were hitherto clear of militancy. The most recent case being yesterday's targeted killing of a senior functionary of the BJP and his worker. So the fact that this sort of targeted political killing took place is unfortunate. The fact that it took place in an area that was clear of militancy for very many years now, the entire what we call Chenab Valley, Kishtwar, Inderwal, Doda, that entire belt was completely free of militancy. Today, reports would suggest that 8 to 10 people are moving around in that area. So, I mean, bad is bad. Can it get worse? Yes. Do I hope it doesn't? Well, obviously. But I don't see sort of either I think Government of India understands the gravity of the situation, but I think they're grappling with what to do about it, which is also worrying. I'd be a lot more confident if I thought they had some ideas and they wanted to put those into play. But at the moment, the feeling I get is that they're completely bereft of any ideas. They're just taking it every day as it comes, hoping that somehow things will improve. But that's not the way it's going to work.
Where exactly did things go wrong? And what could have the BJP and the PDP government done differently?
People who observe Kashmir closely, including some who I see sitting here, had actually warned about the implications of what this alliance would be. I honestly felt that he and a few others who were saying that, look, this is going to be really bad, were exaggerating the extent to which this would affect the psyche in the state. But unfortunately, they were right and I was wrong. The alliance really did play a part in fueling resentment, in fueling disappointment. It's not a coincidence that the focal area of our trouble today is not along the line of control. It's not where you would automatically assume infiltration would play a part. It's South Kashmir. The largest number of youngsters joining militancy today are from South Kashmir. The lion's share of the incidents of militancy is South Kashmir. So there has to be a reason why militancy is sort of, the roots of it right now are in what was known as the political bastion of the PDP. Now, what could they have done differently? Well, perhaps not tying up in the first place would have been one of them. One of the things, having tied up for the sake of sort of governing together, they could have been more respectful of sentiment. I think publicly humiliating the Chief Minister the way Prime Minister Modi did in that famous rally in Srinagar's cricket stadium, where Mufti Sayyid and his daughter called for dialogue and reconciliation and stuff, and the Prime Minister very publicly turned around and said, I don't need advice. I know Kashmir better than anybody else. I've made more trips to Kashmir than anybody. I've been an RSS Karyakarta here. I don't need advice on how to handle Kashmir. I know what to do. You put together an agenda for alliance and then completely wish it away. You sort of disown it. Very little of the sort of nuts and bolts of it, particularly on the political front, sees any forward movement. So, I mean, they're small incidents, but you can't underestimate the impact these have on public sentiment. A lack of clarity in terms of what the government was meant to do. I mean, take for example when Burhan Wani was killed. You had the Chief Minister turning around and saying, well, if I'd known that Burhan Wani was there, I would have stopped the encounter. So, I mean, in effect, you were saying that, well, Burhan Wani's death was wrong and the protests that followed his death were correct. So what signal are you sending to the police and the security forces? So there was a lot of confusion in terms of what the mandate of the government was, what it was supposed to do, what its political sort of moorings were. Coalitions are never easy at the best of time. I mean, I ran a coalition for 6 years with the Congress. It wasn't an easy job. That having been said, until sort of towards the fag end, I believed that the BJP was being a more reasonable ally with the PDP than the Congress was with me. But I guess the differences between the North Pole and the South Pole were far too wide, and we paid the price for it.
In the recent ULB election in Kashmir, the NC was not part of it. In the process, what is going to happen is that, the independents, some of whom, have joined or left your party, is going, and with the help of BJP, they are trying to capture the Srinagar Municipal Corporation. So how do you justify the NC's boycott, if I can call it a boycott, of the ULB polls?
Well, I mean, a political party has the right to choose whether it wants to take part in elections or not. We chose not to take part. We chose not to take part because we believed we had to make a wider point about the threat to Jammu and Kashmir's special constitutional status. And like it or not, this opening of connecting the ULB elections to 35A and 370 was actually given to us by the government. It's the government that took the line in the Supreme Court that please delay a decision until these elections are over, because the elections will have the court process will have implications for ULB and Panchayat elections. That said, we didn't ask everybody else to stay away. We didn't, unlike the Hurriyat conference, we didn't lead a boycott campaign. We didn't tell people not to fight. We didn't tell people not to vote. We were very sort of careful in making sure that all we said was that we are not participating. We're not telling people not to participate. Now, if in the PDP followed, I'm not sure I would have done the same thing if the PDP had announced their boycott before we did. But they chose to follow and also stay away. In that vacuum, yes, you've ended up with people winning who perhaps ordinarily would not have thought of that. But that's sort of electoral politics. I think it also perhaps gives New Delhi something to think about. This belief that the National Conference and the PDP can immediately be replaced by alternate forces is also not true, because we stayed away and look what happened. Now, I'm not suggesting that the National Conference and the PDP participating in this election would have massively boosted turnout, but it definitely would have been better than the 1%, 2% and 3% that you got. Maybe marginally so, but still, you would have had at least the makings of an election instead of what turned out to be, for want of a better word, a farce.
But Omar, is it a principled position on Article 370 and Article 35A, or is it a more cynical calculation, knowing that the people are so disillusioned that they would not turn out to vote, and actually, you can ride on the back of this disillusionment by citing this as a principled position?
For a party like mine that has participated in every election since '96, staying away from elections is not an easy decision. And as I told my colleagues in the working committee meeting and in the core group meeting before that, in the short term, we may be able to sell this to our advantage, but I'm not convinced that in the medium to long term, staying away from this election is actually advantageous to a party like the National Conference.
One distinction that your party has with the other parties is that you were basically instrumental in bringing Kashmir with the union, the whole accession. And promise was of special status, return to pre-53 position, and now the way this country is moving, rather than talking about pre-53 position, you have challenges to 35A, you have challenges to 370. So in a way, it is also a breach to that compact, where you were part of it. So how would you manage it now? What would you tell people?
No, we will continue to tell people what we have been doing so far. That 35A and 370 is, it is critical to Jammu and Kashmir's continued relationship with the rest of India. Look, you cannot open a debate on 35A and 370 without opening a debate on accession, because they are two sides of the same coin. Jammu and Kashmir acceded to the Union of India because Jammu and Kashmir was promised special status within that union. This did not happen with any other state of the Union. Now, if you are going to reopen Jammu and Kashmir's special status, the conditions, the very framework on which Jammu and Kashmir became a part of India, you are actually threatening the very basis of accession, whether you are willing to accept that or not. Now, I for one believe that when push comes to shove, as we have been able to convince the Supreme Court twice in the past when a similar challenge was mounted, I am still I believe that we will be able to convince the Supreme Court of the validity of our argument. Supporting elements of the ruling party mounting these sort of challenges to 35A and 370 don't help matters. But I'm not pessimistic to the point where I'm saying that we have reached the point where we are irrelevant to this debate, or there's nothing that we can contribute to the situation there. We continue to stand firm behind that belief that restoration of Jammu and Kashmir's autonomy is the political way forward towards resolving this problem. The difficulty we face is in convincing Government of India to accept that there is a political problem in Jammu and Kashmir. They don't want to accept that. They want to see Jammu and Kashmir through the prism of security, through the prism of economy, through the prism of employment. That Jammu and Kashmir is an employment problem, Jammu and Kashmir is an economic problem, Jammu and Kashmir is a development problem, Jammu and Kashmir is a security problem. They are unwilling to accept that Jammu and Kashmir is a political problem. But then no government is permanent. Who's to say what will happen in the future parliament election in 2019? Prime Minister Modi is not there forever. So for now, what we have to do is to ensure that there is no further erosion of Jammu and Kashmir's special status. For that, as I said, we're mounting both a defense in the Supreme Court as well as a public campaign around it to educate people about what 370 and 35A means. And in the meantime, we continue to remain hopeful that 2019 will throw up a dispensation that is more favorable to understanding that these sort of forces that are fully integrationist in nature are not in Jammu and Kashmir's best interests.
Jammu and Kashmir governor has said this more than once, that politicians from Jammu and Kashmir speak one thing inside and say another thing outside. So do you think that politicians from J&K have a different stand in front of GOI and outside?
Look, I can't talk for all politicians. I can only speak for myself. And I don't think Governor Saab can cite a single instance where I've said something different in Delhi, something different in Jammu, and something entirely different in Srinagar. I've said the same things in office as I've said out of office. In fact, this ease with which we paint politicians all with one brush, I think needs to be avoided. I think what has happened is that Governor Saab has given a series of interviews. I think it's fair to say that Governor Saab, again, this will probably get me into trouble, but it's true, Governor Saab has given more interviews in 10 days as governor than Vohra Saab gave in 10 years as governor. But then different individuals do things differently. But the problem also is that Governor Saab has said things and then had to retract them. It's sometimes wiser to say less and listen more, but to each their own.
Do you think that there is a Islamic State ideology in the valley? How do you see its spread?
I haven't seen evidence of an Islamic State ideology in Jammu and Kashmir. Is there more awareness of religion and what it means? Yes, in some quarters I would accept that there is more awareness about religion and its practices and its tenets, but that is not unique to Jammu and Kashmir. There is heightened awareness of religion in most parts of this country today. Sometimes what happens in one part of the country causes a backlash in others. So when you see heightened sort of movements in terms of banning particular types of foods or banning particular types of practices, it has a spillover effect in other areas. But I mean, does this mean that an ideology has changed or an ideology has taken root? No. There has been a sort of Muslim component to the trouble in Jammu and Kashmir right from the beginning. Hizbul Mujahideen was the militant wing of Jamaat-e-Islami. Jamaat-e-Islami is what? It's the political wing of a Muslim way of thinking. I mean, that said, other than a handful of flags that you see waved on a Friday because Times Now and Republic, and don't quote me on the names, are sending their camera crews there, is not Islamic State. It's grandstanding more than anything else.
There seems to be some effort from the BJP side, you saying the independent and those people who are close to the BJP or aligned with BJP, to form a government before the governor's rules expire. So if that happens, how is it going to affect the parties like NC and PDP?
Well, if it happens, it will affect the PDP very badly because it will be the PDP that will have broken up. The PDP as an entity will cease to have existed. I mean, I assume you're talking about a state government as opposed to the municipality of Srinagar. Yeah. Well, I mean, for a state government to be formed today, one of two things will have to happen. Either existing parties will have to realign themselves, which means that the Congress, the PDP, the National Conference will have to come together, or the PDP and the BJP will have to rediscover each other, or impossible, but the National Conference and the BJP will have to sort of decide to govern together. I don't see any of these situations arising. Then the other option is that you split parties. Jammu and Kashmir has already paid a very heavy price for this sort of politics. The office of Chief Minister is not limited. It's not a private limited company meant for only a handful of individuals or a handful of families or a handful of parties. It is an office that is available to any bona fide state subject of Jammu and Kashmir. But the way to go about it is to contest 87 seats in the assembly and hope that the people of Jammu and Kashmir give you a majority. It's not by making and breaking and trying to wean away elected representatives from another party. So again, if Government of India is serious about trying to arrest the deterioration in the situation there, one of the other things they need to do is to put an end to all this speculation about making and breaking and forming third fronts. By all means, form a third front in the elections. Let that third front go against the Congress, go against the BJP, go against the PDP and the National Conference. Let the electorate decide. And if you want to sort of restart mainstream political space, dissolve the assembly. The moment you dissolve the assembly, political activity will pick up. It will have to. Parties like mine, parties like the Congress, the PDP, we will have to get active in the field. Today we're sitting pretty. Parliament election, jab honge tab honge, us waqt 6 ummeedwar uthane hain, we'll see what happens. The moment you dissolve the assembly, every single assembly constituency will have 8 to 10 potential candidates from each political party. Everyone will get involved. Perhaps that's the way forward.
Jammu and Kashmir has one of the highest number of Rohingyas, and most of this migration took place when NC Congress was in power.
Really?
Yeah, that's what the stat says. Now there is this debate about their deportation identification from different parts of the country. So how do you see this?
Can I ask you, what harm have the Rohingyas done so far?
No, that's what.
No, that's what I want to ask you. What harm have they done? What anti-national activities have the Rohingyas?
Government says they are illegal migrants.
From what I understand, they were given refugee status because of the problem in Myanmar. Most of them that I recall have bona fide cards identifying them as refugees recognized by the United Nations body that handles this. But I mean, are we a country that is no longer willing to accept or protect people that are persecuted in their country? Is that what we stand for now? That we will not give people temporary shelter? You're not giving them citizenship. You're not giving them state rights. You're not giving them voting rights. All you're doing is giving them a space where they can live temporarily until conditions in their country improve and they no longer feel threatened or persecuted, and then you will send them back. No, I mean, I was Chief Minister for 6 years. I do not recall a single intelligence briefing by MI, military intelligence, by IB, by RNAW, or by the state CID, which in any way suggested that the presence of Rohingyas in Jammu and Kashmir was a threat to national security. Not a single one. If the only problem that we have with the Rohingyas is because of the religion that they follow, then I think that's extremely unfortunate, because as a country we have often given shelter to populations and people that have felt persecuted.
Shalini.
My name is Shalini. The divide between Jammu and Kashmir appears to have increased since the PDP-BJP government was formed. The latest example being the urban local body elections when Jammu voted in large numbers. How do you think the Kashmir-centric parties like PDP and NC, can they ever bridge that gap? Now, especially now since the BJP...
Well, hasn't there always been this sort of electoral divide? Look, I mean, electoral divisions take place like this. Ladakh votes differently, Kargil votes differently, Jammu votes and Kashmir votes differently. I mean, it is a state that has sort of very clear-cut population divisions. But when push comes to shove, it's also a state that comes together. From time to time, politics does try and divide the state. So it's not as if the Kashmir-centric parties, and I won't speak for the PDP, but at least parties like mine, it's not as if we are electorally irrelevant in Jammu. We have a strong base in the plains of Jammu, in the hills of Jammu, and of course our main base comes from the valley. Now, from time to time, political parties do try and play this up. I mean, the BJP has done it to their advantage by playing up this whole belief that Jammu is discriminated at the hands of Kashmir. But then they've been ruling the center for almost, 4.5 years now. They've been ruling the state since January 2015. If there had been this massive diversion of resources meant for Jammu to Kashmir, they would have corrected it by now.
The question is on Pakistan. We have a new government there, which is led by Imran Khan, and it's supposed to have a backing of the army there. So do you think there's a kind of window of opportunity there for India and Pakistan to resume the dialogue process?
We don't get to decide who will govern Pakistan. So if we are going to say, look, we will sit and wait until we get a government of our choosing in Pakistan, it may be a very long wait before that happens. I think at some point or the other, we are going to have to accept that engagement with Pakistan is in India's best interests. That having been said, Pakistan will also have to accept that some of India's concerns need to be taken on board. You can't continuously thumb your noses at India's concerns about Hafiz Sayyid's free movement, about the lack of delivery on any sort of justice for the 26/11 attacks. I mean, talking to Pakistan doesn't mean that Prime Minister Modi has to descend on Islamabad and go and... we can engage without it being summit-level talks. We can engage at the foreign secretary level. We can certainly engage at the foreign minister level on the sidelines of meetings and conferences. But a sort of basic dialogue and interaction needs to be maintained. Find a slightly more even ground.
Umar, moving away from Jammu and Kashmir, what do you make of the forthcoming parliamentary post-2019 elections at a national level? And I'm sure you have dealt with Mr. Modi and Mr. Amit Shah. What is your sense of this BJP, because you served as Mr. Vajpayee minister in that era?
Is it a dramatically different BJP from the one that I worked with when Prime Minister Vajpayee was in charge? Well, yes, of course it is. I think nobody would suggest otherwise. What do I make of the 2019 elections? I don't think anybody knows what the heck is going to happen. It is such a fluid situation. Everybody you talk to has a different point of view, a different sort of outlook, and the same person has a different outlook a week later based on some sort of development. So is the Mahagathbandhan going to happen or not? Who knows? What will Mayawati do in UP? Will she do UP differently than she's done Chhattisgarh and Madhya Pradesh? To what extent will Mr. Chandrababu Naidu succeed in rallying sort of anti-BJP forces together? He's suddenly now become the sort of cementing factor. Sometimes I have disagreements in terms of strategy in this entire fight, because I think when we make it look as if we're all ganging up against Prime Minister Modi, we're actually playing to his advantage. I think allowing Prime Minister Modi to be the victim in all this is the biggest favor that we can do him. So I don't think it helps our case when 14 or 16 of us sit together on a stage and then sort of blast him. It would be much better strategically if we did this at a lower level state-wise. So have a sort of have an understanding in West Bengal, have an understanding in UP, have an understanding in Andhra and Telangana, but don't line all of us up. What does it matter if I go to Telangana or not? I have nothing to do in there. There's not a single vote I can affect in Telangana. So why put me there? What's the point of my bringing somebody from Andhra? Let's take Chandrababu Naidu ji, for example. Tomorrow if we are part of this wider fight against the BJP, what does it matter if Chandrababu Naidu ji comes to Srinagar and addresses a rally? For the most part, people won't understand what he's saying. And even if they understand, it won't affect the way they're going to vote. But when all of us line up, it allows Modi Saab to claim that, look, these guys are all ganging up against me because I've stopped their corruption. I've jailed their leaders. I have been a tough prime minister, and that's why they can't stomach me. And I think the second thing we need to do is to guard against making personal attacks. Trying to demean the prime minister, again, allows the prime minister to take a sort of, shift the narrative to being a victim. Whether it's Manishankar Iyengar's comment or whether from time to time people saying Prime Minister is a thief. That somehow the Prime Minister's credibility is seen differently from the credibility of the BJP. So when we attack the Prime Minister as a person rather than the BJP as a party, we are actually helping the Prime Minister in this election campaign. Now these are just my views. And as I said, this is my assessment. Most of the opposition leaders I've spoken to disagree with me, and they're right to.
We are seeing in UP the two arch rivals closing ranks.
Yeah, I got a taste of that in that book launch yesterday.
Why should we not expect the similar thing for the sake of people in Jammu and Kashmir in your state?
Well, for the simple reason that the BSP and the SP are coming together to keep the BJP out. They are fighting for their political survival more than anything else. In the case of the National Conference and the PDP, we basically fight each other. We are not threatened by the BJP, Our sort of core constituency is not threatened by the BJP. The Congress is. So if the National Conference and the PDP come together, we will basically eat up each other's political space. We won't make much of a dent as far as the BJP is concerned. The BJP will continue to do what it has to do in Jammu and the areas where it has a bit of influence. And again, the moment the National Conference and the PDP come together, you remove sort of space for legitimate opposition within the mainstream. So I don't think the National Conference and the PDP coming together will do anything to damage the prospects of the BJP, but will sort of not help the prospects of mainstream political space in particularly in Kashmir. So I think it's important that we continue to fight each other hammer and tongs. I think we can agree to disagree on most things, agree on a handful of important ones, and carry on there. I think that's important for the health of mainstream political space in Kashmir. What we also need to guard against is this attempt to sort of further divide voices there. I think it's there's already been far too much division. Us coming together will actually make the situation worse.
Is there a possibility that NC can go with BJP in the near future, or are you ruling that out completely?
If I had to come together with them, I would have done it in 2014 when they knocked on my door. The National Conference is going to fight these elections on its own strength. And we hope that now, it's been coalition politics in Jammu and Kashmir since 2002. I'm hoping that people are so fed up of coalition politics now that they give a single party rule another chance. I'm hoping it's mine, but honestly speaking, if it's not, I just hope they actually do decide to vote for one particular party. Jammu and Kashmir has had enough of coalition politics. Coalition politics, it has some advantages, but it has a lot of disadvantages. And I think this generation now needs to experiment with single party government for at least one term. It was much easier to align with a Vajpayee who looked at Kashmir through Insaniyat, Jamhuriyat, Kashmiriyat. This is a very different BJP.
Thank you so much, Umar. It has always been wonderful. Thank you for your very kind answer.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.